Hello, this is Jay, and behind me is a painting that I painted of a Maiko, and I'm going to tell you about how I did it and who Maiko are and what they do. So let's get into it. First, I'm going to start with a study. So this is going to be like the final painting, except on a much smaller scale. And this is going to allow me to quickly go through the process that I would do on the final painting and see what it's going to look like. And if there's anything that I don't quite like about it, then I can change it in the final painting. But this gives me it gives me an opportunity to work out my ideas in advance and see what needs to be changed. So I'm going to start out doing a drawing and then doing a tonal underpainting using a wash of thinned out oil colors. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to put in the final layer of oil paint. So here I'm painting a Maiko, but who are Maiko? Well, they're a symbol of Kyoto. They work to preserve the charm and experience of traditional Kyoto hospitality. They're apprentices to become geisha, or as they're known in Kyoto, geiko. They're the same thing, geiko and geisha, it's just different names, but from here on I'll refer to them as geiko. So a lot of the public perception, at least in the West, surrounding geiko comes from misconceptions from popular media, such as memoirs of a geisha, which often aren't completely accurate portrayals of geiko. So, who they actually are professional entertainers who practice traditional Japanese arts such as dance, playing instruments, and singing. And their primary work is entertaining guests at dinner parties called ozashiki, where they'll perform those arts as well as talk to guests and pour drinks for them and play games. And this means that they must be highly socially skilled and coordinate with other geiko in order to ensure an atmosphere in which guests can enjoy themselves. They also sometimes have public performances at dances or festivals or other special events. The profession of the geiko originates from districts of cities, which historically were designated for the practice of prostitution. But these districts would evolve eventually into entertainment districts where entertainment activities outside of prostitution were practiced. And that's the origin of geiko in the 18th century. And they did not engage in prostitution, but instead provided song and dancing. Now, geiko are recognized as traditional artists and entertainers. In Kyoto, Maiko and geiko live, work, and train in 5 different districts called Kagai or Hanamachi. And these districts resemble an older Japan, and entering them is like a portal into a different time. I've been there before at a couple of the districts in Gion and Pontocho, and I've seen Maiko and geiko in person before. Now, the Maiko, she wasn't like dressed all in with like the fancy kimono and the white makeup since she was just going about her day. But I recognized her because of the hairstyle, the traditional Japanese hairstyle, which Maiko wear all the time. Because when the Maiko are in training, they actually put their natural hair into that hairstyle, whereas geiko usually just wear that hairstyle with a wig when going to work and then just have their regular hairstyle. Um, but yeah, the I also saw a geiko in Pontocho one morning, and she was dressed in a light green kimono and was wearing the tall wooden sandals called geta. And it was interesting because the streets were completely empty, and it was just her and like a woman who was accompanying her. But I was very surprised just seeing a geiko walking around one morning, and I didn't even say anything. We just walked by, but it was an unforgettable experience, I would say. Well, you see, I've now started on the final size painting, and I'm working on the drawing. This is a lot more detailed with the fine details of the kimono than I've drawn in pretty much any painting before. So it's a bit of a challenge, taking a little bit more time, but I'm working through it, and eventually we'll get to the tonal underpainting. Now, becoming a Maiko begins from a fairly young age, usually after graduating middle school or high school. And there's a show recently on Netflix that illustrates this pretty well, and it's just a pretty good show in and of itself. It's called Maiko Sanchi no Makanai-san, and girls all over from Japan will apply to okiya, which are houses where Geiko and Maiko in training live with the okasan or mother who manages them, and that like fictitious mother, the okasan, will provide all of the living expenses and training expenses for them. And in return, the Maiko will work for the Okiya to pay off their expenses. So it's kind of like a vocational school. So the Okiya will provide all of that for them, and then the Maiko will work to pay it off. And then eventually, after a probationary period of the applicants who are accepted living at the Okiya, doing chores, and starting to train in the arts, then she can finally debut as a Maiko, like officially as a Maiko. And there's a ceremony that accompanies that where she visits all the other Okiya in the Hanamachi and formally introduces herself. And there's a lot of social formalities like that within the Hanamachi, just like in other areas of Japanese society. Now, when she enters the Hanamachi, she's taken under the wing of an One-san, like an older sister, who is just a more experienced member of the Okiya. And the new younger sister is given a new name, taking a kanji from the older sister's name. So it kind of establishes a lineage. And the newcomer enters into a sort of parent-child relationship with the okasan. So the okasan will care for her and provide for her, similar to how a parent would. And in those ways, entering the okiya is kind of like entering a new family. And the entire Hanamachi is kind of like a family, with all of the new Maiko referring to other Maiko and Geiko, even from other okiya, as like One-san, like an older sister. So okiya are, if you make an analogy to, let's say, the entertainment industry, they're similar to a talent agency. So they'll train and provide the talent, which are the Geiko and Maiko. But there's also the Ochaya, which in that same analogy would be like an event planning agency. So Ochaya are who customers will actually contact, and Ochaya will then arrange for the ozashiki and request Geiko and Maiko and food and make any other arrangements like that. And a famous custom of these establishments in the Kyoto Hanamachi is the policy of Ichigen-san Okotowari, or no first-time customers. So most of these places are members only. In order to attend an ozashiki, you first must receive an introduction from a regular customer. Now, this ensures that customers can build a relationship with the ochaya and that their tastes and preferences can be catered to as the okasan becomes familiar with them. And there's also a financial reason for this. So the bill for entertainment and food and anything else is covered by the ochaya and then billed later to the customer, so you don't have to think about it the same night. And obviously this requires some trust because they're trusting that you're going to pay the bill. And also these places are where mostly just women work and live, so it wouldn't do to have untrusted random people entering them, as well in consideration of other customers. And there's also a rule that a patron will only visit one ochaya in each hanamachi, and again, this allows customers to build a relationship with the ochaya and allows them to get familiar. So all of this and the network in the hanamachi between like the ochaya and okiya and the geiko and maiko, any restaurants or vendors and any other related businesses, ensures the spread of important information. And this whole system acts to establish credibility and trust. So frequenting an ochaya is a signal of trustworthiness and reliability, because if you're trusted within the network, then it's likely that you're a trustworthy person. So companies will often establish relationships um, as customers of the ochaya so that they can be seen as more reliable and legitimate. As you can see, I've moved on from the tonal underpainting, which I finished, and I'm now adding in the final layer of color. And I'd like to talk a bit about what you're actually seeing in the painting of the Maiko. So, about the appearance and what they wear and everything. I'll start with the hairstyle. So, hairstyle, traditional Japanese hairstyle called Nihongami, and these ones are specific for Maiko, but they actually change as they progress through training. So for junior Maiko, there would be a certain hairstyle, and then for senior Maiko, there's a different hairstyle. And there's even certain hairstyles for certain occasions. Something else that changes as they progress is their lipstick. So Michael, who just start out, will only have lipstick on the bottom lip, and then as they progress, then it'll be on the top and bottom lip. And Geiko have different hairstyles from Michael, which is probably one of the easiest ways to tell the difference between them. They'll have a pretty different hairstyle. And as I said before, Michael usually put their actual like natural hair into the hairstyle, whereas Geiko usually just use wigs while working because it's just easier to not have to take care of that hairstyle all the time. And if you do have that hair, then you have to sleep with a certain type of pillow which keeps your head off the ground, and it's relatively uncomfortable. So that's probably another reason why Geiko don't want to have that hairstyle all the time. The hair pieces worn by Michael are called kanzashi, and they're seasonal, so they change according to the month, such as maple leaves in November or cherry blossoms in April. And in traditional Japanese clothing, seasonality is pretty common. So also in the kimono and other accessories that Michael wear, they're also changed according to the season using the appropriate motifs. Michael's kimono are different from regular kimono. So with a regular women's kimono, it's a bit long, but there's something called the ohashori, which is a fold of the fabric at the waist. So when you're putting on a kimono, you'll have sort of excess fabric gathered up at the waist because otherwise the kimono is going to be too long. But when you gather up that fabric and fold it over, it makes the kimono shorter so that your hem isn't touching the ground. But with Maiko's kimono, there isn't that fold at the waist. So their kimono is sort of like too long, and the hem is worn trailing on the ground. But that's sort of the style. However, when you walk outside, you don't want your hem to be dragging on the ground. So they'll pick up the hem when walking outside. And another difference is that the sleeves and the shoulders, they have a tuck sewn into them that is in a similar style to children's kimono. So the image of the Maiko is a sort of like a young, youthful image. So that's why their kimono is styled similarly to children's kimono. Now with Geiko, they'll wear kimono that resembles in a regular sort of adult kimono. So they have a more mature image. There's also the obi, which is like the big fabric belt that you see on kimono. And Michael wear a special type of obi called the darari obi. And it's tied so that the ends will trail long behind the Michael. Whereas Geiko they'll wear a more typical type of obi in a type of knot called the otaiko. One time I was at a restaurant in Kyoto and I saw a wall which had a lot of uchiwa, which is a type of handheld circular fan. And they had a bunch of names of Michael or Geiko and their okia written on it. So I guess Michael sometimes carry these fans around in summer, and when they go to certain restaurants, they might give it to them to sort of act as like a display that they were there. So I thought that was interesting. Maiko and Geiko will wear traditional footwear such as zori and geta, but Maiko also have an interesting type of geta that just looks like a big block of wood and also has a bell on it. So while they walk, it makes a noise. It rings. Okay, now we're at the end of the painting, and I'm just putting the final touches on. The Maiko who I'm painting is from Gion Kobu, and her name is Yuzuha. At the time that I started the painting, she was still a Maiko, but now she's graduated into a Geiko. And that is the painting finished. Thank you for watching.